Ach, up, ach, up, ach. Oh, wang, 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 wang. Good morning. My name is Chris Fox, and today we're talking about my very favorite genre in the world, epic fantasy. So I've been doing this for a long time, and it's funny because when you meet another writer in the wild, you very quickly figure out what genre that they write. And I would say the number one that I bump into is epic fantasy. Authors email me almost every day, it feels like, saying, "Hey Chris, I've got this 14 book epic fantasy that I'm working on." And I took kind of a, I don't know, backwards route to get here because, like everybody else, that's what I said too. You asked me what I wanted to write. I wanted like a 7 million word fantasy epic, right? We all do. And we have all these, grandiose ideas about plots in our world. Well, the problem I ran into is that fantasy requires a lot of things that no other genre requires. Yes, you do need to have amazing characters and you've got to have a great story just like you would in every other genre, but your world building has to be deeper and everything has to have a level of internal consistency that is not necessarily present in other genres. So when I whip out a military science fiction, there are some things that I need to get right. If I'm not doing the ballistics correctly, if I don't get the ranks correct, my fans will get upset. But there's not too much else they're going to give me grief about. Like, as long as my pseudoscience is pretty plausible, they're not very demanding. But in epic fantasy, you better have a really well-tailored magic system. And by that I mean, these people have read Brandon Sanderson, they've read Patrick Rothfuss, they know, in the case of Sanderson, what his alchemical system is like for Mistborn and what drinking various metals will do. You gotta have something similar in terms of complexity, and it's gotta make a lot of sense. So what we're gonna see over, gosh, I don't even know how many videos, is how I have plotted, written, and world built my fantasy epic, because there's so much work that goes into this. It started for me when I was 6 years old. I got really serious about it when I was about 16, and I am 44 today. So 28 years of really hard work on this universe. And I think this is similar for a lot of you. If you're watching this, you can probably say, "Oh yeah, I've been tinkering on my own game since I was, X." And that's great. It takes a long time to really build this stuff. So today, I just wanted to make a quick note about suspension of disbelief. And then we're just going to do, some progress. I'll show you what words I got down. And we'll take a quick look at the document itself, and you can sort of see a little bit. Now, I'm intending this to be high level. We're not going to go directly into plotting, which we'll start talking about next week, or world building. I just want to show you kind of where I'm at. Hey, this is the project so far. I've already got some words down. I worked really hard this week and put down, the first 25,000 words of the book. Anyway, let's jump in. We'll take a little bit of the look at the plotting. And we'll talk about suspension of disbelief, which is something that I feel like you need to get right first and should always be our goal, to maintain suspension of disbelief. So let's jump into that second half. Okay, so as you can see, I've had a pretty good week so far. It is Friday, January 22nd at 5:20 a.m. I am looking at my words so far for the month. I really panicked on Monday because I wasn't quite where I needed to be. I've color-coded this field here to go red if I don't have enough words. And we were in the red at the beginning of the week. So I powered through it all week. You can see I got a total of over 6,000 words every day for 4 days in a row. So I put in a good chunk of the book. So all of this stuff here. And I already had a little bit in there as well. So I'm 11,000 words up on the year before I started writing for today, so at 5:20 a.m. So anything I do today is going to obviously increase that margin. I did what I needed to do, and I sort of got that leeway. But as far as looking at the novel itself, you're going to see this file quite often. This is the current novel that I am writing. So the manuscript itself, it's written in the first person. I am using Dan Harmon's Story Circle. I do have a video on this channel about the Story Circle. So you can see sort of what I'm trying to do. We will probably do another updated one to talk about what I've learned about the Story Circle since I started implementing it, but you can see at least what I'm doing. Now, stuff that you yourself can do. The first thing that I recommend doing when you are working with your plot is to start doing plot segments. And you're just thinking of every cool thing that is going to happen in your story and trying to put it down here in sort of a sequential way. So each one of these will get worked into the plot, and I've kind of ordered them correctly, and I keep adding stuff all the time. I'll think of something new and drop it in here, and then I refine that into the actual plot and start writing it. So today, the chapter that I'm working on will be training. This is where I'm actually at. Edit marker is I need to come behind and read that, make sure it's, cleaned up. And then from prologue through chapter 7 is done. It's pretty much good to go. Beta readers can take a look at that. So this is what I'm looking at. Now, I mentioned in the first half of the video that we wanted to talk briefly about suspension of disbelief. And that's where you're going to see a whole bunch of side files down here for me under research. So I'm just kind of slowly scrolling down. You see I've got classmates and upperclassmen and parents and all sorts of NPCs and the faculty, all sorts of stuff like that. But down here is where I'm really getting into the meat of what separates epic fantasy from other genres. So I need to have a description of how ChemHedge works, which is the game that is played in my world. If you're familiar with Harry Potter, this would be kind of my Quidditch equivalent almost. I have so many different little bits of information. And I realize that I haven't really even told you the core of what the book is about or the series is about, which, maybe I should have led with. So when I start a fantasy novel, the very first thing that I do, or any novel for that matter, is I write myself the first blurb. And I'm going to do dozens of versions of this blurb, and I have, in this particular case, done dozens of versions of this blurb over the years, and we'll keep trying it. But the idea is that even before you started writing your novel, you need to have some idea of what the story concept is, and you have to be able to write it in such a way that people will be interested. So I'm kind of slowly scrolling through it. You can see my first version, and just the 30-second pitch for the novel. The basic premise, if you're familiar with the Magitech Chronicles, is that shattered gods are all over the place. These are dead gods whose bodies still retain power. And in the case of my fantasy world, all sorts of empires have sprung up around controlling these gods because that's where their magic comes from. And our main character is enslaved. He's just a kid. And the place where he lives, they have access to something called void magic. They live on the body of an old god, even though they don't know that they have done so. And our main character is going to come up from there. So I'll start explaining a lot more about what the book is about, what the universe is about. I have rules and character sheets. We're using the Magitech Chronicles role-playing game, which makes things vastly, vastly easier to have all of the rules at my fingertips. So I would say probably next week we're going to start with the plotting. Between now and then, if you have any questions, I invite you to ask them, things that you want to know about, specific bits of world building, anything like that. But next week we'll go through the plot. I'll start from the beginning. I'll explain kind of what the book is about, what I'm trying to achieve, and sort of where I want to go. I have finished, like I said, the first almost 30,000 words, and what I'm going to do is clean it up and start looking for beta readers so that this chunk of the novel will start going out to people and you guys can start weighing in. And then, I hope I can get a nice large pool of beta readers and we can start chewing this up, because unlike previous books, I really, really want to get this perfect. I want to make sure that everything is chiseled into absolute perfection. So as an example, if you look at chapter 4 here, I've got a cut with a question mark. As you're reading through, the prologue is fairly straightforward. If you go into most fantasy novels, you're generally going to get something that is not set in the main timeline, and may confuse readers until they've read like book 3, but it's got some very important information. But after that, once you get into chapter 1, you need to start following somebody. And what I did is I followed them through chapter 3, things are going well, but then in chapter 4, we get a flashback where they're seeing through the perspective of one of their ancestors, and that's a problem. If you are breaking away that soon before people have formed attachment to the character, then they're just going to be confused. So what I will probably end up having to do is, even though this is a great chapter and gives a lot of good world building information, it'll get cut. It'll get cut. It's 2,500 really good words, and it fills in a critical part of the plot puzzle. But I feel like it's too risky to leave the perspective of this character that we've just gotten into that soon. So you'll see, decisions like that I have to make as we're going through the series. Anyway, I hope this is an initial thumbnail. I hope that this gives you some idea of the just litany of things you have to do to be ready to write epic fantasy. We're going to learn a lot more about it in the near future, and I am going to get back to the writing. As you can see, I've got a lot of words to get down today.